Chapter 2389. What is the intention?
1.
The Lord says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." She recited softly, her voice ethereal, yet strangely penetrating. But the sorrow and death here have been twisted into a blasphemous plague. I will, with a compassionate heart, carry out the work of purification. As she chanted, the book of Revelation moved without wind, its pages turning with a soft yet unwavering milky white radiance. This radiance was not as domineering and intense as Orion's, but rather as cool and penetrating as moonlight, enveloping her entirely. With the blessing of this holy light, her superpower index also rose rapidly, eventually reaching 44,000 points, rivaling Saladin. A battle between evenly matched strongmen is about to erupt. Stubborn and obstinate, Saladin lost his last bit of patience, his languid expression vanished, and his eyes instantly turned icy cold. Instead of rushing forward, he became like ink dripping into water, his figure suddenly becoming blurred and flat, and in the next moment, he completely merged into the shadows on the ground. This is precisely his power, Lord of Shadows. Leibniz's pupils contracted slightly. She could sense that Saladin's aura had not disappeared, but had completely merged with the omnipresent shadows around him, as if he himself were the ruler of this shadowy realm. Suddenly, the shadow beneath her feet began to writhe as if it were alive, and dozens of sharp shadow spikes shot out without warning, aiming straight for her ankles and body. These spikes are not physical entities, yet they carry a chilling power to cut through the soul and an absolute sharpness on a two-dimensional level. Leibniz did not dodge, but simply paused the book of Revelation lightly. The grief of mourning. She whispered the true name of her ability. There was no earth-shattering display, only an invisible and intangible yet seemingly pervasive sorrowful force that emanated from her center. This force takes the form of a grayish-white energy, like plague smoke, and spreads silently. The shadowy spikes that shot towards us, upon touching the gray-white plague smoke, were like metal being thrown into strong acid, emitting a sizzling sound of corrosion. The shadow energy they contained was quickly contaminated and decomposed, their structure collapsed, and they eventually turned into wisps of black smoke and dissipated. Oh, a conceptual plague that can directly annihilate energy structures. Saladin's slightly surprised voice came from the shadows, then became erratic, coming from all directions. Interesting. Let's try this. The light above the battlefield suddenly dimmed, and large swaths of shadow gathered in the air, eventually forming a rolling, pitch-black thundercloud that covered an area of hundreds of meters in diameter. This is a thundercloud storm formed by Saladin combining himself into two dimensions with the shadow energy in the environment.
Boom. Crack.
Black lightning bolts, composed entirely of condensed shadow energy, struck down from the thunderclouds like a torrential rain. These lightning bolts not only possess terrifying physical destructive power, but also have the eerie properties of eroding the spirit and freezing the soul. Leibniz raised his eyes, gazing at the devastating thunderstorm, his eyes filled with even greater sorrow. She raised the book of Revelation high, and the pages turned faster, more grayish-white plague smoke pouring out of the pages, forming a thick, swirling cloud of plague above her head. The black lightning struck into the plague clouds, but instead of exploding, it seemed to sink into a sticky quagmire. The shadow energy on the surface of the thunder was rapidly infected and eroded by the gray-white plague, causing its light to dim rapidly and eventually disappear completely before it could penetrate the clouds. The plague cloud itself was being consumed by the thunder and was becoming thinner, but Leibniz continued to chant, and the apocalypse kept replenishing this sorrowful power. The defense is decent. Saladin's voice carried a hint of mockery, but can you defend against attacks from the plain? As soon as he finished speaking, a thin black line, as thin as a hair and almost imperceptible, appeared out of thin air in the space to Leibniz's side and then cut horizontally at a speed beyond visual perception. This is not an energy attack, but a two-dimensional shadow blade formed by Saladin compressing the power of shadow to its extreme. Its sharpness is enough to easily cut through three-dimensional space like paper. For the first time, a look of seriousness appeared on Leibniz's usually calm face. She could sense that the rules of this two-dimensional shadow blade were extremely high. Although her plague smoke could erode energy, its effect was greatly reduced when it came to cutting through space. At the critical moment, she suddenly shielded the Book of Revelation with her side. Clang! A deafeningly loud bang, like metal rubbing violently against glass, erupted. The pages of the Book of Revelation burst forth with an unprecedentedly brilliant holy light, forcefully blocking the invisible two-dimensional cut. The immense force sent her staggering backward, and the light on the pages of the book flickered violently, clearly indicating that she was not having an easy time resisting it. As expected, the apocalypse is your core. In the shadows, Saladin's figure slowly reformed from 2 dimensions into a 3-dimensional entity not far in front of Leibniz. He licked his lips, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light. Once you destroy it, your plague will be nothing to fear. He made a grasping motion with both hands, and 2 enormous shadow blades, each over 5 meters long and composed entirely of 2-dimensional shadows, materialized in his hands. His figure blurred again, transforming into a zigzagging black lightning bolt, wielding a massive shadow blade, launching a fierce close-quarters attack on Leibniz from all sorts of tricky angles. Leibniz was forced to switch to a defensive posture. She gripped the Book of Revelation tightly in one hand, using it as a shield to block the unpredictable 2-dimensional shadow blades, while her other hand continuously unleashed grayish-white plague smoke, attempting to erode Saladin's true form. However, Saladin's movements were too unpredictable, switching freely between 2 and 3 dimensions, and the plague smoke could often only touch the afterimage he left behind. In an instant, on the battlefield, a black lightning bolt could be seen frantically attacking a nun shrouded in gray-white plague and holy light, with ear-piercing collisions and the hissing sound of energy annihilation filling the air. The forces of shadow and plague constantly collided and eroded each other, corroding the surrounding ground and making the space itself seem somewhat unstable. Saladin, unable to break through, gradually lost patience. He suddenly retreated, disappearing back into the shadows. The next moment, the shadows of the entire battlefield seemed to boil over. Countless 2-dimensional shadow blades, like willow leaves in a storm, shot out from the ground, from the air, and from every corner, forming an indiscriminate, all-encompassing shadow blade storm. At the same time, the shadowy thunderclouds in the sky gathered again, unleashing even denser black lightning. Leibniz was at the eye of the storm, her face pale, and the light of the apocalypse began to flicker under such a dense and powerful attack. She felt unprecedented pressure. Chapter 2390. What is the intention? 2. The pitch-black shadows and the gray-white plague clashed fiercely on the desolate battlefield, as if 2 completely opposite wills were tearing each other apart. Saladin and Leibniz have now reached the level of black bishops. With the blessing of sacred objects imbued with the power of their respective religions, they possess combat strength far exceeding their own capabilities. Within this dark forest, they formed a special domain, where they fought and slaughtered each other. Who could have imagined that people who were originally part of the 6th generation of humans and went to the moon to save all of humanity would end up as enemies? But for their own purposes, they must fight to the death. The air distorted and the heavens and earth roared. Even the powerful figures watching from afar had to exert their best defensive measures in order to barely withstand the aftershocks of the energy bursting from the center. Saladin's eyes were cold, and he completely blended into the darkness. The Shadow King ability he unleashed completely covered the entire space, as if only the blackness he dominated remained between heaven and earth. In the center of that endless darkness, Sister Leibniz stood like a holy statue, the Book of Revelation radiating a mournful glow on her chest. The gray plague spread like a tide, engulfing all the shadow blades and lightning that tried to approach. A futile struggle. Saladin's voice echoed in all directions, cold and chilling, as if it were the whisper of the will of the entire darkness. Weeping cannot change your fate. In the absolute shadow, your only end is annihilation. He formed a huge shadow, his entire being becoming a shadow that filled the sky and the earth. Above the heavens, a gigantic face unfolded, gazing down upon the entire earth, with dark lightning flashing from its mouth. Leibniz slowly opened her tear-filled eyes, her gaze unwavering. Her voice was gentle yet firm. The Lord says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Saladin, your darkness is nothing but a twisted obsession, and obsession will eventually be dissolved by mercy. As soon as she finished speaking, the pages of the Book of Revelation flipped sharply, as if in response to her prayer. Countless gray-white plague mists suddenly converged, forming a constantly rotating vortex barrier around her. It was not a simple defense, but a barrier with the dual will of purification and annihilation. Any shadow that approached would be instantly eroded. Saladin showed no expression in the face of this situation. The assassins knew the Holy See's secrets all too well, so they were not afraid of the power of their faith at all. On the land of the Dark Realm, shadow demons, like water ghosts lurking in the water, twisted and burrowed into the ground, suddenly erupting from beneath Leibniz's feet. Dozens of two-dimensional shadow blades, like venomous snakes crawling out of hell, with a sharpness that cuts through space, frantically tore at her defenses. "Sever it." Saladin's voice echoed through the heavens, and the shadow blades intertwined to form a massive black net that enveloped Leibniz. At the same time, thunderclouds and storms descended from the sky, with countless black lightning bolts striking down like venomous snakes. The grief of purification. Leibniz suddenly opened his clasped hands, and the gray-white plague surged violently, transforming into a surging tide that rushed out from all directions. This is a plague-like force that can erode and corrupt everything. The shadow blade crumbled upon contact, disintegrating instantly like ice and snow meeting fire, emitting a sharp, sizzling sound. The collision between the black mist and the shadow blade caused the heavens and earth to tremble, and spatial rifts appeared continuously. The shattered rocks were swept into the energy storm and instantly turned to dust. At that moment, it seemed as if even heaven and earth could not withstand their power. Saladin's figure flickered and reappeared from the shadows. He made a fist with both hands, which then materialized into two enormous shadow blades. These shadow blades are formed entirely from compressed two-dimensional energy, so sharp that even space itself trembles. His gaze was as cold as a knife, and his figure transformed into a black lightning bolt, carrying destructive power as he slashed wildly. With a casual strike, an enormous black shadow light curtain appeared, seemingly splitting space in two. It had no thickness. The two-dimensional shadow blade could cleave through anything. Even Zhang Yi would have been wary of this tactic in the past. Because there is no dimensional attack with thickness, there is a chance to directly pass through his dimensional gate and attack his main body. Leibniz was forced to fight back. She used the Book of Revelation as a shield, its heavy, ancient pages unfolding before her, bathing her in a holy, gentle light that made her appear like the Virgin Mary. She still clasped her hands together in prayer, but the sacred light became her best defense, as if to purify all the suffering in the world. Holy light barrier. It was this holy light barrier that repeatedly withstood those terrifying slashes that were powerful enough to cut through three-dimensional space. Clang.
Clang.
Clang. The ear-piercing, scraping sounds of metal against glass erupted one after another. Each impact forced her back several steps. The holy light flashed continuously, and the gray-white plague surged along with it. Hold on. I'll make you watch helplessly as faith crumbles into nothingness in the face of darkness. Saladin sneered, his offensive growing even more fierce. Although Leibniz is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse of the Holy See, she is the weakest in combat. However, because her faith was the purest and her heart the kindest, she was able to maximize the power of the apocalypse. But in Leibniz's eyes, tears of sorrow welled up. She sang softly, "Sorrow and death are not to be feared, What is truly terrifying is the darkness of a lost soul. Saladin, your soul has long been swallowed by shadows, and I will play a requiem for you in mourning." As she chanted, the divine radiance of the revelation suddenly shone brightly. Countless gray-white plague mists condensed and took shape, transforming into a giant mourning crow with outstretched wings. The gray raven circled in the air, its wings carrying a sorrowful power capable of annihilating everything, and flew straight toward Saladin. Saladin's face, hidden in endless shadows, revealed a solemn expression. Leibniz's attack, the ravens formed from the power of plague, were not merely energy entities, but rather a tangible manifestation of faith and prayer. He let out a low shout, and the shadow blade raged wildly with each strike, tearing the heavens and earth apart, seemingly trying to rip the huge gray raven that symbolized calamity apart. However, the calamity crow split into tens of thousands of crows during the impact, swooping down from different directions and instantly engulfing him. Rumble. The energy exploded, causing the heavens and earth to tremble violently. A violent shockwave swept around, as if it would swallow the world. On the other side of the battlefield, Merlin and the members of the Knights of the Round Table were naturally not immune to the dangers either. As their king and commander clashed, they too mobilized. "Actually, I'm not good at fighting. I prefer working from the back. But now, it seems there's no other way." Chapter 2391. What is the intention? 3. Merlin smiled helplessly and shrugged, then pulled a staff from his waist. However, the next moment, the staff flashed and transformed into a noble phantasm identical to King Arthur's Excalibur. Theocratic deprivation. Let's do a hat trick. Merlin the Magician, with a superpower index of 39,000. This strong man, who doesn't fight, is the strategist of the Knights of the Round Table, the true number 2. His staff transforms into a sword, and his ability allows him to perfectly replicate any supernatural power he witnesses, including replicating King Arthur's power, the Sword of Victory and Oath. That was one of the abilities he was most familiar with and most powerful. At this moment, the enemy he faced was the Sun and Moon Angels of the Knights Templar. The Sun Angel Middelin and the Moon Angel Serial stood side by side, radiating contrasting yet complementary brilliance. The two were dressed in pristine white combat suits, with white wings formed from their supernatural powers growing from their backs, making them look like true angels. The highest concept of combined attack techniques in the realm of supernatural beings was created by these two. Even later, when Zhang Yi led an expedition to the Wulwan Empire to train the Huashu Kingdom's extraordinary combined attack techniques, his inspiration came from them. Since their return from the Eye of the Devil, the two have experienced a significant increase in strength. The two of them have reached a power level of 28,000. However, when the two join forces, their abilities complement each other, making them comparable to the White Bishop. Are we really going to fight to the death? The Sun Angel Middelin smiled helplessly. It seems unavoidable. Our ideals are different, and it's only a matter of time before friction occurs. Serial, the Angel of the Moon, stared at Merlin and even had time to smile and greet him. "It's been a long time since we last met, Your Excellency Merlin." "Oh no, it's more familiar to call you Heisenberg." Most of these strange people in Europe knew each other. Moreover, most of them did not come from ordinary families, but from noble families. For example, Serial and Merlin were both alumni of Trinity College. Merlin's real name was Raven Heisenberg. Merlin helplessly spread his arms. The sword seemed harmless in his hands, but no one dared to underestimate this young genius. "I don't like fighting either. But you guys from the Holy See are a bunch of lunatics. And you always like to do bad things. I can't let you go without stopping you." Serial and Middelin's eyes turned somewhat hostile. "You are insulting us. You are insulting the believers of the Holy God." Merlin narrowed his eyes, and his tone turned icy. "Do you really think we don't know what you're trying to do? You've committed the sin of betraying humanity, and I must punish you severely." Middelin and Serial exchanged a glance, as if they understood something, and then looked at Merlin at the same time. The two were practically twins, their chemistry so perfect that even their movements were almost identical. Years of rigorous training have forged a deep understanding between them. Only in this way can they unleash the full power of their combined attack. There's no point in explaining to a heretic like you. You'll never understand the grand ambitions of the Holy See. Then, let's start the war. Guide the radiant light of the sun. Midorine raised his hand, and the blazing golden light, like the burning sun, rushed straight towards Merlin. Standing atop the bright moon, I am the eternal holy light. Serial chanted softly, the cold silver light waves pouring down like the cold moon, intertwining with the radiance of the blazing sun. The combined power of the two to perform the dance of the sun and moon instantly transformed into an energy disk where the sun and moon shone together. The disk, carrying destructive power, crashed down with a deafening roar, as if it were going to crush the heavens and the earth. Merlin, however, remained calm and unhurried. He stared at the other party's release of power, but only smiled slightly. In his right hand, the sword of victory and oath remained firmly gripped. Ancient runes appeared in his eyes as he whispered, the deprivation of divine authority. In an instant, he directly copied the power of Midorine and Serial. Merlin raised his left hand, and his body was simultaneously radiated with the blazing flames of the sun and the cold light of the moon. In his hands, an energy disk radiating the dual brilliance of the sun and moon also materialized. That's impossible. Midorine and Serial were both shocked. Their combined attack technique, Dance of the Sun and Moon, had actually been copied by Merlin. Merlin smiled slightly, a playful glint in his eyes. Don't forget, I'm a magician. Show me a spectacular hat trick. Before he finished speaking, Merlin gently pushed the enormous yin-yang disc, which was imbued with the light of the sun and moon, toward Midorine and Serial. His movements were gentle and slow, but the power of the sun and moon twin wheels dance rolled and crushed towards the two of them with an unparalleled force. Although Midorine and Serial were briefly shocked, they quickly recovered and joined forces to unleash the authentic sun and moon double-wheel dance. The enormous disc collided with the combined attack of the two in midair, causing an incredibly terrifying explosion. The dazzling light illuminated the heavens and the earth, and the aftershocks caused the battlefield to crack open again, sending rocks flying everywhere. Midorine and Serial were forced to retreat, their eyes filled with rage. However, they could not back down. They joined forces again, and their radiance suddenly surged. Dance of the Sun and Moon, ultimate style. The two men roared in unison. This time, they poured all their power into it, forming an energy sun and moon that was even more terrifying than before. Merlin just laughed and used divine power deprivation, again with both hands. Instantly, his body also erupted with the ultimate brilliance of the sun and moon. Two almost identical forces collided again in midair. Boom! This time, the aftershocks of the explosion even reached the distant battlefield between Saladin and Leibniz. The heavens and earth seemed to be torn apart at the same time. The battle between the two top experts had brought the entire battlefield to the brink of collapse. The heavens and earth roared, and the interplay of light and shadow seemed to tear the sky apart. The battlefield between Saladin and Leibniz was swept away by the energy ripples from Merlin and the sun and moon angels, instantly raising clouds of dust and debris. The two battle energies overlapped, as if the entire world was bearing an unbearable destructive force. Saladin burst out of the explosion of the gray crows, a corner of his black robe torn, a hint of gloom between his brows. He never expected that Leibniz could transform compassion into such tenacious fighting power. His Shadow Lord should have been invincible, but for the first time on this battlefield, he was blocked head-on. "Poor none," Saladin said in a low voice, his voice echoing through the shadows beneath the sky. "You think your mere power of mourning can move me?" He suddenly reached out, and a giant gate formed from pure shadow appeared in the void. That's the core passage of the Land of Shadows. Dear viewers, thanks for staying with me. We'll try to get you more updates. Please like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. Love you all.